Now you see the human. Now you see the human circulatory system. So human circulatory system, also called the blood vascular system, consists of a muscular chambered heart, a network of close branching blood vessels, and blood, the fluid which is circulated. So it is also called as blood vascular system, consists of a muscular chambered heart, a network of close branching blood vessels, and blood, the fluid which is circulated. Now heart, it is mesodermally derived organ, is situated in the thoracic cavity in between the two lungs, slightly tilted to the left. It has the size of the clenched fist, that is closed hand, right? It is protected by a double wall membranous bag, this is pericardium, and pleural membrane is present in lungs. Okay, in here it is pericardium, there is a pleural fluid, it is pericardial fluid, I think. Yeah, enclosing the pericardial fluid. Our heart has four chambers. Right? So our heart has four chambers, two relatively small, two relatively small upper chambers called atria, and two larger lower chambers called ventricles. A thin muscular wall called the interatrial septum separates the right and left atrium. A thin muscular wall called the interatrial septum separates the right and left atrium, whereas the thick walled the interventricular system separates the left and right ventricles, right? The atrium and the ventricle of the same side are also separated by a thick fibrous tissue called the atrioventricular system. However, each of the septa are provided with an opening through which the two chambers of the same side are connected. The opening between the right atrium and the left ventricle is guarded by a wall. So right atrium and left ventricle is guarded by a wall formed of three muscular flaps or cups. Three muscular flaps or cups, the tricuspid wall, whereas the bicuspid or mitral wall guards the opening between the left atrium and left ventricle. As you can see, left ventricle. And so on the left side, okay, for the right side you see tricuspid wall, for on the left side you see mitral wall or bicuspid wall. On the left side, the opening of the right and the left ventricles into the opening of the right and left ventricles into the pulmonary and artery and the aorta. So the opening of the right and the left ventricles into the pulmonary artery and the aorta respectively are provided with the similar walls. The walls in the heart allows the flow of blood only in one direction, from the atria to the ventricles, and from the ventricles to the pulmonary artery or aorta, from the atria to the ventricles, and from the ventricles to the pulmonary artery or aorta. These walls prevent any backward flow. So these plans prevent any backward flow. The entire heart is made up of cardiac cycles. So the entire heart is made up of cardiac cycles, cardiac muscles. The walls of the ventricles are much thicker than that of the atria. So the walls of the ventricles are much thicker than that of the atria. A specialized cardiac musculature for the nodal tissue is also distributed in the heart. Right. A patch of this tissue is present in the right upper corner of the right atrium called the sinoatrial node, that is SAN. Sinoatrial node, that is ACM. Another mass of this tissue is seen in the lower left corner of the right atrium. So of the both in right atrium, that is lower left corner of the right atrium, close to the atrioventricular septum called the atrioventricular node, that is AV node. A bundle of nodal fibers, atrioventricular bundle. A bundle of nodal fibers, that is atrioventricular bundle, AV bundle, continues from the AV node, that is atrioventricular node, which passes through the atrioventricular septa between atria and ventricular septa to emerge on the top of the interventricular septum and immediately diverge into a right and left bundle. Now these branches give rise to minute fibers throughout the ventricular musculature of the respective sides and are called the Purkinje fibers. The nodal musculature has the ability to generate action potential without any external stimuli, that is, it is auto-excitable. So the nodal musculature has the ability to generate action potential without any external stimuli, that is, it is auto-excitable. Okay, why it is auto-excitable? Because it can generate without any external stimuli. However, the number of action potentials that could be generated in a minute vary at different parts of the nodal system. Now the AC node can generate the maximum number of action potential that is 70 to 75% per minute, and is responsible for initiating and maintaining the rhythmic contractile activity of the heart. Therefore, it is called the pacemaker. Our heart normally beats like 70 to 75 times in a minute, average 72 beats per minute, right? Now the cardiac cycle. So we are talking about the cardiac cycle, like how does the heart function. Like let us look at. To begin with, all the four chambers of a heart are in a relaxed state, that is they are in a joint diastole. So joint diastole, like it is in the relaxed stage as the tricuspid and bicuspid walls are open. As the bicuspid and tricuspid walls are open, blood. So they are in joint diastole as the tricuspid and bicuspid walls are open. Blood from the pulmonary veins and vena cava flows into the left and the right ventricle respectively through the left and right atria. As the tricuspid and bicuspid walls are open, blood from the pulmonary veins and vena cava flows into the left and right ventricle. Blood from the pulmonary veins and vena cava. So the pulmonary veins and vena cava flows into the left and the right ventricle respectively through the left and the right atria, right? So through the pulmonary veins, right, and vena cava. So vena cava, okay, into the left and right ventricle, into the left and right ventricle from pulmonary veins. It means that way, okay. So left, okay. So the left pulmonary veins, right? Pulmonary veins on this side, that is on this, okay. So this is so left. So okay. So left and the right ventricle respectively through. You will understand this much on the diagram. I will explain it. Respectively through the left and the right atrium. The similar valves are closed at this. So now the seminal walls are closed at this stage. So when it is the relaxed stage, so seminal walls are closed at this stage. The AC node that is now generates an action potential which stimulates both the atria to undergo simultaneous contraction. This is the atrial systole. This increases the flow of blood into the ventricles by about 30%. Action potential is conducted to the ventricular side by the AV node, the atrioventricular node, and AV bundle from where the bundle of his transmit it through the entire vasculature. So the action potential is conducted to the ventricular side by the AVN and AV bundle from where the bundle of his transmit it to. So after the bundle of his, it is through the like Purkinje fiber, okay. Bundle of his transmit it through the entire ventricular musculature. This causes the ventricular muscles to contract, that is ventricular systole. The atria undergoes relaxation, that is diastole. The atria undergoes relaxation, that is this causes the ventricular muscles to contract, that is ventricular systole. At the same time, the atria, it was like atrial like joint diastole. So the atria undergoes relaxation right now, that is a diastole, that is coinciding with the ventricular systole. Now ventricular systole increases. What it does, it increases the ventricular pressure, causing the closure of tricuspid and bicuspid wall due to attempted backflow of blood into the atria. So when there is a pressure inside the ventricles, then the walls, then the blood of the flow will be backward, that is into the atria, but the walls they prevent it, okay. As the ventricular pressure increases further, now after further increase the similar valves guarding the pulmonary artery, that is right side, and the aorta, that is left side, are forced open, okay. So pulmonary artery on right side and the aorta left side are open, allowing the blood in the ventricles to flow through these vessels into the circulatory pathway. Now the ventricles now relax, that is ventricular diastole, and the ventricular pressure falls, causing the closure of the seminal walls. So when the pressure was further increased, the seminal walls were open, but as the ventricular pressure falls, causing the closure of the seminal walls, which prevents the backflow of blood into the ventricles. Now this prevents the backflow of the blood into the ventricles, okay. As the ventricular pressure declines further, the tricuspid and bicuspid walls are pushed open by the pressure in the atria exerted by the blood which was being emptied into them by the veins. Again the cycle is repeated right now. The blood will flow freely into the atria as the valves are open right now. The blood now once again moves freely to the ventricles. The blood now once again moves freely to the ventricles. The ventricles and atria are now again in the relaxed, that is joint diastole state or as earlier. Soon the SA node generates a new action potential, and events described above are repeated in that sequence, and the process being continuous. Okay, the process being continued. So this sequential event in the heart, which is cyclically repeated, is called the cardiac cycle, and it consists of systole and diastole of both the atria and ventricles, right? So cardiac cycle, it involves like both, is called the cardiac cycle, and it consists of consist of systole and diastole of both the atria and ventricles, right? As mentioned earlier, the heart beats 72 times per minute. The heart beats 72 times per minute. That many cardiac cycles are performed per minute. From this, it could be deduced that the duration of a cardiac cycle is 0.8 minute, right? So 70 times per minute means 72 times in 60 seconds. So in 1 second it is 0.8 seconds. So one cardiac cycle occurs in 0.8 seconds. During a cardiac cycle, each ventricle pumps out approximately 70 ml of blood, which is called the stroke volume or beat volume. The stroke volume multiplied by the heart rate, that is number of beats per minute, gives the cardiac output. Now, therefore, the cardiac output can be defined as the volume of blood pumped out by each ventricle per minute, and averages its 5000 ml or 5 liters in a healthy individual. The body has the ability to alter the stroke volume as well as the heart rate, and thereby the cardiac output. So body has the ability to alter the stroke volume as well as the heart rate, and thereby the cardiac output. So you can alter the stroke volume as well as the heart rate, and thereby the cardiac output. For example, the cardiac output of an athlete will be much higher than that of an ordinary man. Now, during each cardiac cycle, two prominent sounds are produced which can be easily heard through the stethoscope. The first sound, that is love, is associated with the closure of the tricuspid and bicuspid valves. So tricuspid at the right side, at the right atrium, between the right atrium and right ventricle, and the bicuspid valve is present at the left atrium and left ventricle. So whereas the second heart sound, that is dub. So first one is the love and second is the dub, is associated with the closure of the semilunar valves. So is associated with the closure of the semilunar valves, right? These sounds are of clinical diagnostic significance, right? So this is what. So so now we are talking about the ECG, that is the electrocardiogram. So in electrocardiogram, that is ECG. So what happens in the ECG, like, so when the patient goes into the cardiac arrest, it is useful. This type of machine is the electrocardiograph. So this type of machine, that is electrocardiograph, is used to obtain an electrocardiogram, that is ECG. Electrocardiogram, it is a ECG, it is a recording. So ECG is a graphical representation of the electrical activity of the heart during a cardiac cycle. So to obtain a standard ECG, a patient is connected to the machine with three electrical leads, one to each wrist and to the left ankle. So one to each wrist, that is 2, and one to the left ankle, that continuously monitor the heart activity. For a detailed evaluation of the heart function, multiple leads are attached to the chest region, and here we will talk about a standard ECG. But we are talking about the standard ECG. Each peak in the ECG is identified with the letter from Each peak in the ECG is identified with a letter from P to T that correspond to a specific electrical activity of the heart. The P wave represents the electrical excitation or depolarization of the atria, which leads to the contraction of both the atria. So I think now I change my place. I think you don't hear the voice outside, of outside. So Now we were at like the P wave represents the electrical excitation or depolarization of the atria, which leads to the contraction of both the atria. The QRS complex represents the depolarization of the ventricles, which initiates the ventricular contraction. The QRS represents the depolarization of the ventricles, okay, which initiates the ventricular contraction. The contraction starts shortly after Q and marks the beginning of the systole. So the T wave represents the return of the ventricles from excited to normal state, that is repolarization. So firstly it was depolarization, then repolarization. Depolarization is the excitation, just remember. No, okay, excitation. The P wave represents the electrical excitation or depolarization of the atrium. So depolarization is the excitation, that is the contraction, right? And repolarization is the relaxation, okay. So the end of the T wave marks the end of the systole. So end of the T wave marks the end of the systole, that is repolarization. So obviously by counting the number of QRS complexes that occur in a given period time, one can determine the heartbeat rate of an individual. So by counting the number of QRS complex, the more the number of QRS complex, you can determine the heartbeat of an individual, okay. Since the ECGs are electrocardiogram, okay, electrocardiogram, it is a recording, not the machine. So ECGs obtained from different individuals have roughly the same shape for a given lead configuration. Any deviation from this shape indicates a possible abnormality or disease. Hence, it is of a great significance, right? So the diagrammatic representation of a standard ECG. So P, U, Q, R, S, T, as you can see in the diagram. Okay. Now we are talking about the double circulation. So what about the double circulation, right? The blood flows strictly by a fixed route through blood vessels, the arteries and veins. Basically each artery and the veins consist of three layers, that is an inner lining of squamous endothelium, and that is the tunica intima, and middle layer of smooth muscle and elastic fibers, the tunica media, and an external layer of fibrous connective tissue with collagen fiber. So okay, the tunica externa. The tunica media is comparatively thin in the veins. Okay, I repeat this again, it's too much given in here. The okay, the blood vessels, the arteries and the veins. So basically each artery and the veins consist of three layers: an inner lining of squamous endothelium, that is the tunica intima, and a middle layer of smooth muscle and elastic fibers, that is tunica media, and an external layer of fibrous connective tissue with collagen fibers, the tunica externa. The tunica media is comparatively thin in the veins. So as mentioned earlier, the blood pumped by the right ventricle, we are talking about this one, like this right ventricle, as you can see in here, right ventricle. So blood from by the right ventricle enters the pulmonary artery, as you can see, this is the pulmonary artery, enters the pulmonary artery, whereas the left ventricle pumps blood into the aorta, as you can see in here. A left ventricle opens the dorsal aorta, as you see, okay. Left ventricle open into the aorta. The deoxygenated blood pump into the pulmonary artery is passed on to the lungs, as you can see, this is passed on to the lungs, from where the oxygenated blood is carried by the pulmonary vein to the, you see, pulmonary vein to the left atria, okay, to the left atria. I think the things are now clear, as before it was not. Carried by the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. This pathway constitutes the pulmonary circulation. So from left ventricle to pulmonary artery to lungs, and then pulmonary vein, then left atria, this is the pulmonary circulation. The oxygenated blood entering the aorta is carried by a network of arteries, arterioles and capillaries to the tissues, from where the deoxygenated blood is collected by the system of venules, veins and vena cava, and emptied into the right atrium. So this is the systemic circulation, as you can see, from the from the left ventricle, dorsal aorta, then body parts, then vena cava, that is great veins, to the right atrium. This is all the systemic circulation. Now the systemic circulation provides nutrients, oxygen and other essential substances to the tissues, and takes carbon dioxide, that is harmful other substances, for elimination. A unique vascular connection, now this is important, a unique vascular connection exists between the digestive tract, that is alimentary tract, and liver, called hepatic portal system. So liver and the digestive tract, they have a hepatic portal system, a unique blood, a unique a unique a unique a unique vascular connection, right? The hepatic portal vein carries, now hepatic portal vein carries blood from intestine to the liver, blood from intestine, that is tract, that is the intestine, to the liver before it is delivered to the systemic circulation. So the hepatic portal vein carries blood from intestine to the liver, and from liver it gets to the systemic circulation. So it is like important, so it is benefit for intestine, because it is taking that blood from intestine to the liver, and from liver, because otherwise it from liver to systemic circulation, but it is taking from. So this is how you can just remember this line. a special coronary system of the, a special coronary system of blood vessels is present in our body exclusively for the circulation of blood to and from the cardiac musculature. For a cardiac musculature, there is a special type of coronary system of blood vessels is present in our body exclusively for the circulation of blood to and from the cardiac musculature. Okay, now you can see schematic plan of blood circulation in human, right? So as you can see, there is a pulmonary artery, then lungs, then pulmonary vein, then there is a left atria, then left ventricle, then right atria, right ventricle, then dorsal aorta, then as you can see now the body parts, then vena cava, that is great veins, then right atrium, and all of these. So now as you can see, that is a capillary that has a wide lumen, then there is a vein that has wide lumen as well. The tunica tunica media is very thin, they have the smooth muscles, they have the artery also have the smooth muscle, as you know, but it has very thin, but it has very small lumen. Okay, so this is why the flow of the blood is very fast to the small lumen in artery and as compared to the veins. So now we are almost at the end of the chapter. Now the regulation of cardiac activity. Now the normal activities of the heart are regulated intrinsically, that is auto-regulated by specialized muscles, nodal tissue, as we can see SA node, then AV bundle, then AV node, and all this. But hence the heart is called myogenic, because it is auto-regulated, because without any external stimuli it is get started. Okay, but a special neural center in the medulla oblongata can moderate the cardiac function through autonomic nervous system, that is ANS. But a special neural center in the medulla oblongata can moderate the cardiac function through autonomic nervous system, that is ANS. Neural signals through the sympathetic nerves, that is part of ANS, can increase the rate of heartbeat. Okay, the strength of the ventricular contraction, and thereby the cardiac output. Okay, now on the other hand, the parasympathetic neural signals, another component of ANS, that is autonomic neural system, they decreases the rate of heartbeat, they decreases the rate of heartbeat, speed of conduction of action potential, and thereby the cardiac output. Adrenal medullary hormones can also increase the cardiac output. Adrenal medullary hormones can also increases the cardiac output. So disorders of circulatory system, right? High blood pressure, that is hypertension is the term for blood pressure that is higher than normal, that is 120 per 80. So 120 and 80 is the normal, so hypertension is the term for blood pressure that is higher than normal, that is 120 per 80. In this measurement, 120 millimeter Hg is the systolic, that is, it is a pumping pressure, it is a contractile pressure, and 80 millimeter of Hg, it is a diastolic, that is or resting pressure, or it is a resting pressure, right? If repeated checks of blood pressure of an individual is 140 to 140 per 90, that is 140 over 90 or higher, if 140 or 140 per 90 or higher, it shows hypertension. High blood pressure leads to heart diseases and also affects the vital organs like brain and kidney. Okay, they are affected. Now coronary artery disease. Now coronary artery disease, often referred to as arteriosclerosis, affects the vessels. This affects the vessels that supply blood to the heart muscles. Now this affects the vessels that supply the blood to the heart vessels. Now it is caused by deposition of calcium, fat, cholesterol, and fibrous tissues, which makes the lumen of the arteries narrower. So this makes the lumen of the arteries narrower. Now angina. So it is also called the angina pectoris. Now angina, it is also called the angina pectoris, because pectoris, that is muscle of the near the chest. A symptom of acute chest pain appears when no enough oxygen is reaching the heart muscle. So when no enough oxygen is reaching the heart muscle, the symptom appears, that is chest pain, acute chest pain. Now angina can occur in men and women of any age, but it is more common among the middle age and elderly. It occurs due to conditions that affect the blood flow. So it occurs due to conditions that affect the blood flow. So whatever affecting the blood flow, or no enough oxygen is reaching the heart muscle, okay, that can cause the angina pectoris. It can happen in both, okay, at mainly it is commonly seen in the middle age and elderly, okay, but it happen in any age, right? Okay, now the heart failure. Now what about the heart failure? Heart failure means that the state of heart when it is not pumping blood effectively enough to meet the needs of the body. So when it is not pumping blood effectively enough to meet the needs of the body, it is sometimes called congestive heart failure, because congestion of the lungs is one of the main symptoms of this disease. Now heart failure is not the same as cardiac arrest. So heart failure is not same as the cardiac so heart failure is not the same as cardiac arrest when the heart stops beating. So heart failure is not the same as cardiac arrest, because in cardiac arrest, when the heart just starts beating, or heart attack when the heart muscle is suddenly damaged by an inadequate blood supply. Okay, so this is the heart attack. So heart failure when heart is not pumping blood effectively to meet the needs of the body, okay, and it is called the congestive heart failure, because congestion of the lungs is one of the main symptoms of the disease. Heart failure is not the same as cardiac arrest when the heart starts beating, or heart attack when the heart muscle is suddenly damaged by an inadequate blood supply. So this is how it goes, and this is how your chapter is finally done in here. Then there will be the summary, right? So this is all. So if any diagram left, let me know and I will cover it. If you want to see this diagram, okay, I'll explain this section of a heart. You see, this is the vena cava, then sinoatrial node. You can see right upper corner of right atrium, and atrioventricular node, that is AV node, in left lower corner of the right atrium, in left lower corner of the right atrium, as you know, in left lower corner of the right atrium. And then this is the right atrium, and then cordia tendina. There are cordia tendina present, that is between the right atrium and right ventricle, and then there is aorta and pulmonary artery, then pulmonary vein. You see, pulmonary artery, and then pulmonary vein, then left atrium. You see in the diagram. Then bundle of his is given, okay, bundle of his, then it forms the Purkinje fibers. So left ventricle, you see right ventricle, and then interventricular septum, and then there is the apex. So interventricular septum, they are the thick, okay, interventricular system, they are the thick walls, as it's given in here. Where it is, okay, the atrium and the ventricle of the same side are also separated by thick, okay, so the antro and this is also present. I don't okay, whereas thick wall, the interventricular system, you see, interventricular, it is thick. Only thin wall between the only thin wall between the, so our head, like, so okay, the thin muscular wall called the interatrial septum. So between the atria, only thin wall, okay, so between the atrial septum, that is a thin wall, thin muscular wall is present. So this is it. So this is the section of human heart, and then it's all is done. As you can see, this diagram is very okay. So this diagram was left. So diagrammatic representation of form elements in blood. So this is the RBC, then platelets, these are the cell fragments of megakaryocytes, that is thrombocytes, megakaryocytes, a cell in the bone marrow. Okay, large cells in the bone marrow. Then eosinophils, you see it is bilobed eosinophil. Then basophils is like stamp. Then neutrophils, it's like after the ionosphere it is bilobe, but it is more than two lobes, you can remember like that. It is neutrophils. And then monocytes is the biggest one. Then T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. So B lymphocytes, there is side nucleus, and T lymphocytes, it's like around the circle. So you can or 2 or 3% eosinophils, very important, right? So you can remember like that. So this is your chapter and summary is left. Okay.